Good morning and welcome to our Wednesday morning wake-up training on working with buyers the peak producer way. I'll get my iPad ready to go here. So working with buyers. As usual, we talk about habits, attitudes, and skills. This is right out of the Peak Producers approach. Our classes focus usually on skills and tools, and today we're going to be talking about business development skill, working with buyers. Obviously, we tie that into creating good habits, and initially those things need to be disciplines for us to make the best use of our time and energy to achieve the results we want. And all those together tie in with having a good attitude and creating a good attitude for us. And all those things go together for us to be a has and not a has not or a has been. So working with buyers and getting them off the fence. Getting people off the fence is oftentimes one of the biggest problems we run into with buyers. So let's start with the basics. A buyer is someone who buys. Excuse me. A buyer is someone who buys. Why do we start with that and want to make that clear? Because a lot of us have in the past, and many of us may still be right now, and especially if you're a newer agent, you may find yourself working with people who you want them to be a buyer and you hope they will be a buyer, but they may not be a buyer, and they perhaps won't be for a while. That doesn't mean they won't be at some point in time, but bottom line, keep in mind, a buyer is someone who buys. So, and we're going to get into how you differentiate that, how you make sure you are working with a buyer who is a buyer and not a looker. And it's okay to have a relationship and build a relationship with a looker, but make sure you don't mistake them for a buyer. So the upsides to working with a buyer, of course, it's probably the quickest way to generate a commission check. Obviously, in this tight market, getting a good listing in certain neighborhoods in each of the markets that we're in has probably been the quickest way to get a commission check. But in general and typically throughout your career, working with a buyer will be the quickest way to generate a commission check. You get a referral from somebody, you meet somebody at an open house, they call on your sign on one of your listings, and they say, I'm looking to buy, got a lease that expires in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Our student loans are going to be paid off in 6 months. We'd like to start looking for a house. That's probably the quickest way to generate a commission check generally. Number two, you can sell your own listings. And ideally, those timings on those people that are going to be buying might even be faster than that. But again, you can sell your own listings. If you get lucky, you get that sign call from somebody, and they say they want to look at that listing and they love that neighborhood. Wow, you might be able to sell your own listings and get a double ender or a me deal, limited agency situation, and make a very nice commission on it. A couple of our agents in the Fisher's office do this a lot and get buyers at open houses and sell their own listings to them, whether they're represented by another agent in which they work with that other agent, or whether they do a double-ended deal or not, but they sell their own listings. So number three, easy to get referrals from a buyer. And we'll talk about that and how that works and why that is. The reason that it's easier with a buyer than it is with a seller, there's a whole lot of activity right up front, winning the listing, getting the house ready, getting it on the market, showing them all the marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And again, ideally, it sells quickly, but in general, homes stay on the market an average of 90 to 120 days. So you got 3 or 4 months of working with that seller where you're kind of just sitting there. You're not going out with them looking at houses. You might be, but if they're selling and moving out of town, you may not be doing that, or selling and whatever it might be. So you're going to be spending more face-to-face, more proactive time with a buyer than with a seller. And I'm going to talk about the 3 times to ask for or remind a buyer that referrals are important to you, and ask them for referrals, and hopefully get referrals 3 times during the course of helping them buy a house. We'll talk about that. And finally, the upsides, there's less pressure on your performance. With a buyer, the house is the focus. Yes, your services, your knowledge, your expertise, your guidance are all very, very important, but they're mainly focused on the house, finding the house, choosing the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, your guidance is important, but they're focused on that house. Whereas with a seller, they're focused on getting their house sold. And if the market turns tough or the house is not in great condition and it's on the market, up to that average days on the market or beyond the average days on the market, all of a sudden, they really don't care about your personality and how helpful you've been. All they care about is the fact that their house has not sold, and that reflects on you and your performance. So less pressure, and that's why buyers are usually the first clients that new or newer agents will work with. The goal overall in the business to have at least an equal balance of listings and buyers, if not a 60-40 split of listings and buyers. That's because listings take less time. We just talked about that, and there's a downside to that, of course, but listings take less time and effort. So the goal is to get to the point where you've got 60% or so of your business comes from your listings and 40% from buyers. So the downsides of working with a buyer, obviously we talked about you spending time with them proactively. Well, the downside of that is they can be very demanding of your time and energy. We'll give you some methodology on how to control, guide, and lead your client and manage and direct the time that you spend with them. But even at that, and especially in a tight market, they can be very demanding of your time and energy. We've all gotten that phone call at 6:30 in the evening. You're just sitting down to dinner with your family and your kids, and the phone rings and they say, "Hey, we just saw this new listing on Zillow, and we'd like to see it at 7. So how do you deal with that one, especially if the market is tight and they've missed out on a house or two? So it can be very demanding of your time and energy, and sometimes you need to respond to that. Most of the time, hopefully, you won't need to respond and jump through hoops because you're guiding and directing the way they're going. Again, market conditions may say something different. So number 2, the downsides, no guaranteed income. With a listing, you're pretty much guaranteed that hopefully that it will sell if you've done your pricing correctly, if you've helped them stage it correctly, if you've done your marketing correctly, and the market is reasonable, then there's a pretty good guarantee that the house will sell and you'll get a commission check from it. With a buyer, there's no guarantee of that. There can be a lack of loyalty. They may get tired. They may run into somebody at an open house. Their brother-in-law may get their real estate license. Oh my gosh, we've all had that kind of thing happen. We've all had the phone call from somebody who says, calls you on Monday morning and say, "Hey Dave, you're going to be really excited and happy for us. We just wrote an offer on a house at an open house yesterday. We got the offer accepted at full price. Aren't you excited for us?" People, that happens. So there's a lack of loyalty. They can get cold feet. They can change their mind. That first-time home buyer may, when they begin to look at things and think things about or talk to other friends who've been renting or continue to rent or whatever, they're worried about the interest rates, et cetera, or they think the interest rates might drop more. They can get cold feet and change their mind. So there's no guarantee. And then the last one there, when deals fall apart, you can lose your client. On a listing, you get an offer 45 days in, maybe a fairly low offer. You try to negotiate a little bit. And the buyer isn't terribly reasonable, and the deal falls apart or whatever. Chances are the seller client is not going to fire you at that point in time if you're doing your job well. With a buyer, they can become really disappointed if they don't get a house because they didn't listen to your recommendations on pricing or their approach and this kind of thing. And a seller can do that as well, but with a seller, you got a listing contract. With a buyer, if they don't take your advice and they don't get a house, they can blame you and walk away, go to somebody else. Seller could also blame you if they're not taking your advice. But again, you've got a contract there that they could always terminate the contract, but you've got a lot more open-endedness in working with a buyer. So those are the downsides of it. So the key, though, to successfully working with buyers and making the best use of your time and developing relationships that will lead to repeat business and referrals is to strategically work with buyers. And step 1 in that is what we call CITO, come into the office. Come into the office. So you get that sign call, you get that floor call, you get that email inquiring on your listing, you meet somebody at an open house, and they say they're interested in buying, etc., etc. The most of the time we'll get people saying, I'd like to go see these houses tomorrow or right now. I'm sitting in front of this house and calling you up. I'd like to see this house. Given the state of security and things that can happen from time to time, be very careful running out and meeting somebody to show them a house when you've not met them. Number one, chances are very slim that they're qualified to buy that house or prepared to buy that house, even if they might be qualified eventually to do it. So don't waste your time or put yourself at risk in any way, shape, or form. Minimize the times that you might try to do that. And what you want to do is to talk about how you work strategically with people to help them meet their goals and avoid frustration. And the first step to that is for us to meet in the office or at Starbucks or whatever. And Starbucks or Hubbard's and Craven's or the local coffee shop counts as coming into the office. The point is, don't go run out and show them houses without knowing who they are or whether they're qualified or not. That's a waste of your time. But get them to come into the office. Here's the thing to remember. If they will not meet with you and come into the office, then they're not going to become a client of yours. And they're, I started to say consciously. They're not consciously probably because they don't know how the business works. But they're wasting your time to go have you show them a house that they have no intention or ability to buy. So don't waste your time with that. But if they are someone who is genuinely, seriously looking to buy a house and interested in having a professional approach to the business of buying a house, and take advantage of our knowledge and guidance on that, then they will come into the office. And so there are dialogues we have where you can give them some thoughts on how important it is to come into the office to meet with you. And again, Starbucks counts as that because you want to make sure that you understand everything possible about what their goals are, what their timing is, and to help them prepare for being successful when they do find the house of their dreams to achieve getting it at the best price they can. So part of that involves the pre-approval process. I guess if I could say that there is a rule that you should really set for yourself, it is never to show anybody a house unless they have a pre-approval. Now, again, if you're meeting somebody and they're saying, we'd like to start looking at houses, you've met them at an open house, and you've seen them and whatever, you might show them a house or two. But the key is, first of all, get them into the office, walk through that checklist of their goals, and I've got the next slide covers that. Go through that checklist of what their goals are, make sure that they're thinking of things about what their desires are that they probably wouldn't have thought about had you not asked them those questions. And that's going to make them appreciate you even more. But getting a pre-approval is key, and we approach that for the fact that, hey, look, we don't want you to be frustrated. If you can get approved for a $200,000 loan, we don't want to go out looking at $250,000 houses because you're probably not going to be able to buy one if you can only put 5% down. So let's not get you frustrated looking at a bunch of $250,000 houses and then find out after you've fallen in love with $250,000 houses that you can only afford a $200,000. Let's start in the right place and make sure that we are not frustrating you or setting you up for frustration. And that's part of that is setting the tone for the way the search will work and the way the process will work, and walking them through that, walking them through the fact that there's 3 stages of negotiation. The first is writing the purchase agreement and negotiating the purchase agreement, which is mainly price, timing, and financial conditions and anything else. The second level of negotiations that they'll need to be prepared to go through is inspections. We just had a class on that a couple of weeks ago on navigating the shoals of inspections and how crucial that is, and that really is a negotiation, not simply a checklist to be viewed as such by either side. So, and then the third stage is the negotiation that may occur on the appraisal. If the appraisal doesn't come in, there very well may be a third stage of negotiation. So this is all by way of helping them understand and appreciate what you're going to be doing for them, setting the tone and showing them that you're going to be fully engaged. And then when you've established that they are a buyer and that they are pre-approved, then set out a time frame and a schedule with them. Great, your guys' lease expires in 6 months. That means we need to have a house ready to be closed on in 5.5 months, so you can move in with 2 weeks left in your lease. That means we have to have it under contract in 4 months. At the end of 4 months, that means we need to start da-da-da. That means, so here's our schedule for finding and making an offer on a home. And you set it up like that. I've used this many times on the commercial side with commercial clients, and they love it because that's the way businesses usually will work. Typically, we don't approach buyers this way. So use this approach, set out the schedule and the time frame, and let them know that you're going to be fully engaged during that time frame with them. Now, again, if you run into somebody who says that, and they meet with you over coffee and they say, well, we're thinking about buying next year. We just signed a new lease, and Sally's pregnant, going to have a baby in 3 months. So we're thinking about buying next year. That's great. You're not going to be going out showing them houses. You can send them information, set them up, encourage them to go to open houses, try to continue to engage them, and win them over so that when a year from now they're ready to look, you can have that process set up. And that would mean starting to look in 6 or 7 months perhaps, after Sally's had the baby and the baby's old enough to take out in the car. So there's no reason not to engage with those people, but you set the time frame for when you're going to be fully engaged. The key role of what I'm going to do to help you folks is to help you make a decision. And the decision might be to not buy a house. And that's okay. I'm going to help you reach that decision. And hopefully the decision, because you've come to me and said you'd like to buy a house, is to buy one. And I'm going to help you with the decision of how to go about that and which one, and help you decide when to make that decision. So we've got checklists and templates available at the Resource Center that are initial buyer consultation templates that asks all kinds of questions. And a real key for us is to use this template, or there's many of these kinds of things available, and make sure you go down through this and ask them all the questions. I guarantee you, you will ask them questions that they haven't thought of. And how does that make somebody feel when you're asked a question, gosh, I'd never thought about that. Wow, that's kind of interesting. So it gives them an appreciation of the level of professionalism that you have and what you're doing, and cements that relationship right up front before you even start showing them houses. So for the first conversation, the goal is to collect and organize, again, to make sure that I know everything I can about what your goals are, to help you achieve those goals, and that may even include helping you shape those goals by asking you lots of questions. The key is to help them understand their big why. Their big why. Why is it that they're wanting to buy a house? And the big why should be things like, we're tired of renting, we don't like the neighborhood we live in now, we're tired of living in mom and dad's basement, excuse me, we want to get Timmy and Wanda in the new school system, or in the Center for Inquiry, Indianapolis Public Schools. There's got to be a big why, and you need to ask enough questions to guide them to that, to make sure that you understand that. And in fact, I would even encourage, I even like to say, so your big why is that you want to cut your commute time from 20 minutes to 10 minutes. And I had this spring a client who sold a house that I'd helped them buy about 4 years ago, and bought a new house precisely for that reason, 20 minutes, to cut the travel time from 20 minutes to 10 minutes, because they had young children and a new infant, and the spouse who worked wanted to be able to run home more easily at lunchtime, and 10-minute drive was able to do that. 20 minutes created a 40-minute commute at lunchtime and made it impossible or difficult for him to do that. So I was surprised at that, but that was their big why, and I was able to help them find a house that served those purposes. So you'll want to find the big why, and you'll want to say it in those terms, because it will come back and you will use that term later on. So the big why, find it, repeat it, get them, is this your big why? Yes. Yep, that's it, absolutely. So then you're going to be educating them about the market. What's going on? It's a tight market. It's a loose market. Interest rates are going down, or interest rates have bottomed out, and they're probably going to start going up. And then to talk about the process. You've probably been looking, 90-some% of people start looking on the internet, of course, at houses, and they've all been doing that, and they'll continue to do that through the process. So the key is to let them know that our goal is to have a process of elimination. We're going to start with a lot of houses and neighborhoods and work that down to the one that you want to buy. So we're going to start with what area of town, what part of town do you want to be in? Usually that's fairly easy. Probably 80% of the time that's pretty easy and straightforward. I want to be in X township schools, or I want to cut my commute from 20 minutes to 10 minutes and still be in Hamilton County or whatever it might be. So that's usually fairly easily done in terms of the area, the part of town. And then the question is the neighborhoods. Obviously the neighborhoods is going to be dictated to a large extent by how much they can afford. If they can afford a $200,000 house, then they shouldn't be looking or considering houses that are in a $250,000 to $300,000 neighborhood. So you're going to be able to, and they probably don't want to look at houses that are in a $100,000 to $150,000 neighborhood. So you're going to be able to fine tune pretty quickly the area and the neighborhoods. What do you do with that client who's moving from out of town and doesn't know the area and wants to look at several different parts of towns? That's a tough one, especially if they're coming from out of town and only have like 2 weekends to come and pick a house. So you're going to have to give them an overall tour, encourage them to look online at various things like that, but encourage them to pick an area and be prepared to talk about the advantages of each of the different areas and guide them toward trying to pick one side of town and then begin to focus on the neighborhoods. And in fact, in the price range they're looking at, this area of town has more neighborhoods and more homes on the market in this price than the other neighborhood or the other area you're looking at. So let's focus on this one because you'll have more selection. So again, 80% of the time, but this is helping them walk through and recognize this is a process of elimination. Then style. We've got this one neighborhood where we've got these brand new homes that are executive ranches that are single floors with a finished lower level and a walkout on a lake. Okay, that's one style. Or is it a 4-bedroom, 2-story traditional home that is more suitable for family and kids? Obviously, depending on their family circumstances and their big why, that's going to guide them toward what style. Do you want to be in a brand new house, a relatively new, younger than 5-year house? Wow, you're just doing a great job of cutting down the neighborhoods you're going to be able to look at. Do you love being near an area like Broad Ripple or Mass Ave in the Indianapolis area, and therefore do you want to be in an older neighborhood, in an older home? Do you like the Tudor style? So help them focus on that by asking questions, and then you'll know which direction to go, and eliminating looking at different things. And if they can't make up their mind, obviously, one of the things they could do is go and drive around on their own on the weekends, go to open houses, and teach them how to make sure they don't get swallowed up by another agent, that you're working with another agent, that they're working with you. So working on the style, and then the goal is to go the process of starting to look together at homes and focus on eliminating those that don't meet their criteria. I had some clients a couple of years ago where we set the criteria. They were coming into town. They had one long weekend, Memorial Day weekend, to pick a house. We did a great job the first couple of days, or first day, but the wife kept struggling to eliminate houses. The husband was really good. Let's eliminate this one. Necessarily, I don't mean to say that it's always the wife. It could be the husband because of the garage. In this case, it was the wife because of a countertop in the kitchen was the example, that she really loved the countertop but couldn't stand the configuration, but didn't want to eliminate that house because she loved the countertop. And the husband and she then had a discussion that evening, and they eliminated that house the next day, and we moved on and were able to help them find a home. But the key is when you walk in with somebody and they go, "Oh, this is awful," turn around and walk out the door. There's no obligation to look at all these houses. Let's not spend time here. You don't like this. It smells bad. Let's move on. So elimination, and ranking houses is the key to that. Would you rank this on a scale of 1 to 5, 5, whatever? And if anything below a 4, it's eliminated. If it's 4 or 5, maybe we keep it on the list. So the key for us in this process is to help them make a decision. As we just said, that's one of the things I'm going to help you folks do, is make a decision. And that decision, and I like to say this right up front, that decision may be that you haven't found the house you want, but I'm going to help you with that decision. And the goal for us is to lead, not push. There are some training and coaching programs out there who actually say, show people 5 houses and insist that they make a decision. Tell them that 5 houses is enough, that you've shown them all the houses that meet their criteria and they need to make a decision. There are coaching programs and training programs that actually tell you to do that. We've had an agent get in trouble who subscribed to one of those training programs and tried that approach and was basically fired by the client because they felt they were pushing as opposed to leading. So never push, lead, but the goal is to be working through a process of elimination. And here's the wonderful peak producers dialogue to use when you've gotten to that point when somebody walks in and they're making noises like my wife made when we walked in for the first time to the house that we've lived in for the last 20 years. And it was, oh, wow, oh, wow. When people are making that kind of noise and they say, yeah, this is a 5, this is a 5.5, here's the questions in this order. So do you like this home? I think it says you like this home. Oh, yes, we love this home. Here's the key question that most of us never remember to ask. And this is leading down that funnel toward eliminating properties and picking the one. Can you see yourself living here? That's, wow, what a different question. Do you like this home? Yeah, I like this home. I think our friends Joe and Wanda would like this. No, can you see yourself living here? Yeah. Wow, I really can. And when people, as you're walking through, if they're saying, this would be Timmy's bedroom, and Joe could set up his train set in this room. This is great. There's outlets all over the place. Can you see yourself living here? If the answer then is yes, well, is this the one you'd like to make an offer on first? So you're giving them a little out by saying first, but you are leading them. Is this the one you'd like to make an offer on first? And ideally, they're in the position to say, yeah, this really is. If you've got 2 more to look at that day and the market isn't terribly tight, you say, okay, let's keep this in mind. Let's go take a look at those other ones, and then maybe let's come back to this one. But if the goal is to get them to say yes or no, I don't think so. And that really helps them with these 3 questions. It narrows it down from, I want to keep this on my list, and it may be that, or all the way to let's make an offer on this one. So how do we deal with the other side where people can't make up their mind or won't make up their mind or don't make up their mind? They're sitting on the fence. And keep in mind that when they're on the fence, when the client is on the fence, we're on the fence with them. We are on the fence with them, and that isn't a good place for us to be. That doesn't put money in our pocket. That doesn't build relationships. That puts splinters in wherever. So remind them, first of all, of the big why. Remember, you wanted to cut your commute down, and so, or we want to get in with the kids before the kids' school starts, and you've got plenty of time to get them into school, or the Fed just announced today that interest rates have been going to tick up in 3 months. That leads them to the cost of procrastination. So what happens if you don't buy? You said that a 10-minute keep it is important to you. The baby's now 7 months old. What happens if you wait another 4 months or 5 months to do this? You might as well not make that change. Or school starts, etc. So remind them of the cost, not only their big why, but what happens if they don't do that. That sort of ties in and grows in their mind the big why. So things to leverage depending on what the market's doing. All of these don't apply every market, but leverage choice. Hey, you know what? The market is tight right now. So if you find a house that you like, there's not that much choice out there. Let's write an offer on it. On the other hand, if the market is slow and not moving and the prices are dropping, they may want to wait, but you can talk about the fact that interest rates are going to be dropping and the prices may go up. So now's the time to leverage price. By the same token, if prices are rising rapidly and the market is very, very tight, then leverage the fact that the prices will go up if you wait. So leverage payment. Keep in mind that especially if you're in a negotiation with somebody who's ready to walk away over, say, $5,000 in purchase price or $1,000 of inspection items, work that down to the payment. Again, sellers are living with the price. Buyers are really living with the monthly payment. And remind them of that. Yes, you're going to put down money, and if you have to borrow more, if you're qualified, and the price is $5,000 higher, look at the number. The interest rates are so low, that's only $30 a month. guys. Can you not go out to dinner once, or not buy coffee lattes at Starbucks every day? Gosh, you could pay $60 a month more if you didn't do that. So leverage the payment when you're working with buyers as opposed to the price. I'm amazed at the number of buyers who will walk away over a few $1,000s on a price when, especially in this market. So leverage the payment, leverage the speed of the market. Obviously, we're in a situation this year where there's been in lots of segments of the market where houses go on the market right away, and they're purchased right away with multiple offers. So if that's the case, you need to leverage speed and how you can be of help to them, submitting offers right away, and be ready to do that. This is where your professionalism comes in. And the goal, though, is to guide them to a decision. Guide them, not push them to a decision. So the key to serving any client, and this applies to sellers as well as buyers, is to meet the emotional needs of the client. Buying a home, making buying decisions is an emotional decision that we justify logically. Again, my wife walked into our house and went, oh, oh, oh. Most people want to fall in love with a house. That's not always a good thing, but there is an emotional aspect of it. It's where you're going to live for a number of years, potentially raise your family, et cetera, et cetera. A key to meeting their emotional needs is to make sure they feel they've been heard. Wow. One of the biggest complaints about us is our failure of communication, our failure of slowness to respond. Make sure they've been heard by echoing back to them what they've said, by responding to what they've said, and by doing what they'd like you to do, as long as you're guiding them and it fits within the right direction to go in terms of helping them make a decision, which we're the professionals and we know how to lead and guide that for them. So if somebody says, I want to see every house on the market, we need to lead and guide them to the fact that that will take a lot of their time and frustrate them, but we want to show that we heard them. And the goal is to make them feel you can do something about their frustration and anxiety, because there is some frustration, some anxiety. Buying a house is a huge thing. Remember, buying or selling a house is usually the biggest personal financial decision anybody makes. Probably 99% of the people in this country, that's the biggest individual personal financial decision they make through the course of their lives. So some top tips further on client service. Silence is deadly. Whether you're working with a buyer or a seller. With a buyer, silence is deadly. You want to make sure you keep in touch with them. We talk often about Touch Base Tuesdays, where maybe working with a buyer who doesn't need to buy and can't buy for 6 months. Don't let a month go by without talking to them. Give them a call. You may have them set up on a search. You may see that they're looking at some things. Give them a call, send them a text. Silence is deadly. And remember that an outgoing call takes 2 minutes and an incoming call takes 20 minutes. That's a rule of thumb. Bottom line is that an incoming call from a client usually represents a request or a problem or an issue and that we have to deal with, whereas an outgoing call usually will avoid those kinds of things and can be quicker. So silence is deadly. Even with that buyer who is not terribly active, touch base with them regularly. Let them know what's going on in the market. Hey, I just sent you another listing that didn't come up on your search, whatever it might be, or this house came on the market, or this house went under contract. I wanted to share this with you since automatic searches don't send pending and sold items out. So touch base and let them know what's going on with things. Again, frequency leads to brevity, and consistent communication gives the client more to talk about when they refer you. Again, most of the time when people are talking about realtors at cocktail parties or at Sunday school or at the golf course or at parties or whatever, is what a poor job realtors do. This is in general. What a poor job realtors do in communicating with people. We're not proactive. We don't get back to them. We hear this all the time. So, wow. What an easy difference to make. Just call up and say, hey, I see nothing's coming on the market that you want to go look at. This house went under contract, blah, 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 blah. Give them an update in 2 minutes. What a great thing for them to be able to, yeah, Dave calls us every week and lets us know what's going on in the market, even though we can't be looking at houses for another 3 or 4 months because of our student loans. This guy's great. So gives them more to talk about. And let's talk now about referring and the 3 times to remind them, actually that's remind them about it during the process of helping them buy a home. So again, most of the successful agents that have taken peak producers and that I talk with and have coached have gotten a lot of referrals over the years, but almost every one of them has said they've never thought to do this during working with a buyer. And that is to ask them 3 times during the process that are perfect times when one could expect them to want to refer us. So the first time, especially with a new first-time home buyer, but even with somebody who's bought a home 10 years ago and is selling it and going to be buying another one, and they're out with you, I guarantee you our approach is probably going to be very different than what they went through the first time they bought the home. So the first time to talk about the referral aspect, first of all, is when you have that first meeting with them. You talk about, I work by referrals. Maybe you were even referred them by one of your previous clients, so it's a natural. But if it's a sign call or an open house, you talk about, hey, I work my business by referrals and so forth. My goal is to earn your confidence and trust so that you want to refer me. So the first time to do that is the first time you go out with them and show them houses. You've set it up very professionally. You've helped them recognize the process of elimination. You've gone through that. Maybe you've even found a house to buy, but let's say you haven't. And at the end of the day, you're back at the Starbucks, you're walking through them, looking at eliminating the one. Maybe there's 2 to keep on the list that were ranked 4 or 5. And again, they can't make a purchase offer until a month or so because their lease expires, etc. You've walked through everything with them. Then you ask 2 questions. So how was this process-wise? Was this helpful to you folks the way we've approached this? Again, ideally, if you've done a great job and you've endeared yourself and gained their trust, they're going to say, yeah, this was great. We've heard horror stories from other people who've worked with realtors who didn't care. You're really so different. Bingo. The next thing to say then is, well, let me remind you that I work by referrals, and I sure would appreciate it this weekend if you, church tomorrow or, parties tonight or golf course or whatever. If you're talking to people and telling them about your process, which they will be, they're going to be talking about real estate, remind them, please mention my name and ask people if they're thinking about buying or selling. And if you get somebody who says, yeah, they are, or they know someone, please pass that information along to me and I will contact them. So I really appreciate that. So that's the first time, is after the first time out. The second time would be, I would imagine it's pretty obvious, they get an accepted purchase agreement. They've made the offer. They found a house that they love. They've made the purchase agreement. They've got a price. Happy, happy, happy. Wow. Congratulations, guys. We've got the purchase agreement. Remember, we've got 2 more states of appraisals and inspection, more negotiation to do, but you've got to I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. And remember to refer me. So have that conversation, then remind them, because people don't think of it unless we remind them, no matter how happy they are with us. Then the third time, obviously, would be when we walk out from the closing table and walk out to the parking lot and give them the bottle of wine or chocolates or a box of cigars or whatever we give to people as our closing gift. Most of the time, realtors say things like, oh, it's been so nice working with you, as if it were a funeral or something like that. It's not a funeral. And part of what the peak producer's approach is letting them know that even though you're not going to be getting another commission check from them for a good while, if ever, you're their long-term real estate advisor. And that's another way to maintain getting referrals from them and contacting them regularly. So again, closing table, thank them, remind them, and then ask them to remember to refer you. So those are the 3 times to remind them to do that. So let's just talk briefly here about the attributes of a professional negotiator, because this is one of the keys that you're going to be doing for them. And when you have that first meeting with them, you're going to be talking about that. One of the skills that I possess and have had lots of training on, and this is where I will get you the best price for a house, is being a professional negotiator. So remember, a professional negotiator remains emotionally rock solid. Doesn't matter what the other agent's doing, doesn't matter what the other client is doing or saying or screaming or whatever. It doesn't matter what our own client is doing or screaming or yelling or crying about. Our goal and the best thing we can do for our client is to maintain emotional stability and help calm them and understand and approach this as a business deal. Yes, it's emotional, but Going emotional with them does not help them. So remain emotionally rock solid. Now, go home and talk to your wife or husband about it, and you can, chastise the other realtor to your spouse or the other agents in the office. But with your client, emotionally rock solid. Keep in mind a 360-degree perspective. Keep in mind looking at everything going around. Don't get focused on that $500 difference on that they won't put in a radon system. Dag nabbit. Keep in mind the 360. Hey, we got a great price. Remember, you told me you'd be willing to pay $2,000 more. I got you this house for $2,000 less. So, let's not worry about the radon, them paying for it. Let's put one in, but that's $500 out of your pocket. You're still $1,500 ahead. Keep the 360-degree perspective and keep their eye on the prize. Again, remember the big why. Remind them, hey, remember your big why. And that's why it's important to use that term. You don't even have to say, remember you want to get Timmy and Sally into school. Remember your big why and talk about that. That should bring up an emotional response in them right now. Being a professional negotiator also means letting the process unfold. Don't become impatient. Impatient usually is a negative for the person who becomes impatient. Yeah, that's fine. Let's get this finished up. If you're dealing with somebody on the other side who's impatient, wow, you've just won. You can win a lot more by slowing things down. So make sure that you don't get impatient. That's a difficulty for me. I tend to get impatient on things. So let the process unfold. And remember to stay relationally connected with your client. No matter how upset they're getting, no matter how they're not taking your advice, remember that you're in this to help them, number one, achieve their goal, but number two, from your standpoint, to develop a long-term relationship that will lead to that repeat business and referrals. And remember last week we talked in the class about how if you do that over the course of the first 9 years and you have a repeat client in 8 or 9 years and they give you one referral every year, that grows into something like 30 sides. If that were to happen perfectly, which always it won't, but that can grow into 30 sides if you work that relationship perfectly and keep that in mind and do a great job with that. So keep that in mind to stay relationally connected, and also seek common ground. Don't focus on the differences. Seek the common ground. Okay, we've agreed on the price, we've agreed on the timing, we've agreed on the financing, etc. So we've got this $500 on the inspection issue between us here. What's the best way to go forward on this? Can we split this? Whatever. Works at the common ground and approaches it that way. And then always be willing to walk away. That can be tough if the person falls in love with a house. And if they have, then you need to make sure that they know that they have that they may need to go the extra mile when it comes time to compromise because they've fallen in love with it. And that may be fine. If they've fallen in love with a house and it's a tight market, they may recognize that. But the key to overall successful negotiation is somebody's willing to walk away when the other side really will not cooperate. Okay, last element here in terms of checklists. When you get the house under contract with the buyer, make sure you put together the pending to closing checklist. Again, we've got this template so that you don't forget something. I tend to usually forget to schedule the pre-closing walkthrough until about the day before. I go, oh gosh, I got to do that. So take a look at the pending to closing checklist. There's lots of them. We have a template so you can use for that. The key is a strong finish with excellent service to get them to the closing table without anything falling through the cracks. Many of our competitors will lose sight of everything when they've got that purchase agreement signed and they're going on working with their next clients or looking for more clients. If we're working on a referral basis, we are able to spend more time, and we understand the importance of spending that time between the purchase agreement and the closing table, and we talk about that with our clients. So, summarize, putting it all together. The skill of knowing how to work with buyers and leading them through the process, along with the habit of controlling and optimizing your time and energy in this process. And again, one of those downsides is that the amount of time and energy that an uncontrolled buyer can demand of us. So it's key that I use the word control, I'd rather use the word lead, so that we're leading them appropriately while achieving the goals and asking for referrals. Those habits of getting into doing that regularly way, along with will help us develop an attitude of knowing you stand on solid platform of growing your business while making your life easier. Obviously, working with buyers can get really hectic, and certain times of the year in certain markets it will of necessity get hectic, but the more you're in a position to lead your clients, to guide them, it will make your life easier. So there we are with working with buyers the peak producer way. And so let's hit the escape button there and go back and see if we have a comment. So thank you, great info. Would appreciate the templates. Yes, will do. Sounds good. I will send that to you, Josh. And thanks very much to everybody. We'll see you next week. Take care.